Hi, everyone. Welcome to Marriage Mastery Workshop. This morning, I am so excited to interview you and welcome to this mastery class. I can't wait to find out more about you and what you do. So Anne started Fully Thriving LLC because she's passionate about helping Christians restore their relationships. Connection and intimacy are essential for a happy marriage. And I believe that my background and her background in coaching, therapeutic, practices, and in counseling, and she's an ordained chaplain as well. So we are very similar in that way. I'm so excited, and she's so unique, and she helps marriages transform because of her experiences and her work. Welcome to the audiences of Ruth Falk. Like, we have some people here that couldn't make it or register for it, so I'm excited that we decided to interview you and record this and share with so many people out there. Thank you for doing this. It's such an amazing work. And what inspired you to get started helping couples transform conflict into connection and intimacy?
Yeah, well, thank you, Ruth. I'm glad to have this conversation and so grateful to know you. And I know that you provide such value for your audience. And so thank you for allowing me to be part of that. Yeah, so I got into this because, well, first of all, let's everybody who's listening, just ask yourself, do you want to feel more connected in your marriage? Do you want to feel heard and understood? And, obviously the universal answer is going to be yes, 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 for really anybody. And for me, how I got into this work is I grew up the daughter of a psychiatrist. And so I was kind of a psychology nerd growing up. When other girls were reading 17 magazine, I was reading Psychology Today. And so I had a passion for everything psychology. And then as life went forward, I found myself in what Leslie Vernick would call a emotionally destructive relationship. And here I had all this knowledge. I had been working for my father. I had been studying things, and I was shocked. I was like, how did I end up here? And then in my situation, there had been some covert behavior. So it wasn't really clear. There was a lot of self-doubt, a lot of wondering, a lot of, do they want this? Do they not want this? Am I too much? Am I not enough? Am I, overwhelming? Am I, not good enough for this? And if you're listening to this, I'm going to guess that you've probably felt those at some point in time in a relationship, of that sense of self-doubt that we experience. And so flash forward, when I started my private, well, first I got the support that I needed, right? So first, hopefully everyone's listening in the sound of my voice is able to see and know that sometimes we just need support. Sometimes we just need somebody in our life to help come alongside us. And I was blessed to have spiritual support, emotional support, mental support in the process of healing my journey. And I really learned a lot out of that experience. So it kind of uniquely prepared me between personal experience and professional experience. So, flash forward, when I started my private practice, I started being flooded with couples in my office. And so it kind of made it clear that, okay, this is the field I'm to delve into. And as I delved into working with couples, I learned some really unique things about how do we heal, how do we walk through the process, and what it takes to really reverse some of the destructive patterns that we can take on in relationships.
Well, I am really inspired by what you said, because I do remember having a covert, narcissistic behaviors that is really hard to pinpoint. Without the knowledge and healing, I wouldn't be able to recognize, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel like I always have to say sorry and always have to explain myself over
Mhm.
and over again to be heard?
So
And, um, my audiences will know that, my book is called Mennonites Gone Wild. There's a lot of religious Christian marriages seem to be good on the other side
sure.
because it looks conflict free. We have same values, same patterns, same, I would say, routines, so to speak.
Sure.
But what's underneath is disconnection and no intimacy.
Mhm.
So, how would you say conflict, can yield connection and intimacy?
Yeah.
When
Yeah. Yeah. So, first of all, I want to acknowledge what you said about kind of the religious community.
Mhm.
It's so frequent. We get caught up in kind of the religious rules versus what it looks like to have a healthy, godly relationship. And
Mhm.
so it's the brain. Here's the background for that. The brain naturally wants to conserve energy. The brain, part of our kind of survival mechanism is lazing. So this is why when you sit down to do your taxes, you find it hard to focus because the brain's like, I just want a break. And so the same thing happens in the way that we walk out our faith often. And this is why oftentimes in religious communities, we have a set of rules, but we don't really have the full understanding of what are the scriptures saying, or what does it look like to walk this out in a healthy way. And so we fall prey to what people have told us versus what really is healthy and godly. So, I just affirm what you're saying, that this is really an issue, and this is a challenge for many people. And so you find yourself hoping and wishing for the best, and you step into a relationship, a marriage, where you're feeling like you've been grounded on, good principles, and then it kind of implodes in your face because it's the rules aren't working for the relationship. And so in order to build trust, I have a system that I use. So
how do you do this? Do you have some process or system?
yeah,
Mhm.
I do. Yeah. So it's called the Fully Thriving Roadmap, and it has 4 components. And so if it's okay, I'll walk you through those components. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Super. So the high overview is, we call it the repair, the rebuild, restore, and receive components of healing. Because when we don't have a systematic approach to the healing, we find ourselves a little bit all over the place, right? And so in this system, what we do is we start with the repair piece that is really about the personal repair, because everyone brings in something to the relationship. Even in a relationship where one person is narcissistic, oftentimes the person that they have partnered with is somebody who either has fear of rejection or abandonment, or has a hard time with some boundaries. And so the narcissist is able to pinpoint them because they know that they can get some affirmation and some encouragement from the relationship. And it's not to say that anybody is responsible for the way somebody else treats them in regard to the narcissistic behavior. And when we look at healing the relationship, we want to look at, okay, what did I bring into the relationship? How does that affect the way that I see my partner, receive my partner, see myself, all that self-talk that we end up having? What we do know is that we are often drawn to people for marriage that will poke at the places that we need to heal the most. And so I call it having the rocket fuel. So these issues that we bring into the marriage become the rocket fuel for the arguments. So when we're dealing with somebody who maybe is, 2 equally struggling people just trying to figure things out, when somebody hurts the other, it's like rocket fuel pain based on their upbringing and what they experienced growing up. And so when that comes into the relationship, we start to work through that so we can see ourselves more clearly, see our partner more clearly. And as a result, we start to see some shifts in the relationship. And then as we continue on, we move into the rebuild stage, because what happens is once we start to see ourselves more clearly and we see our partner more clearly, we're still making up stories in our head. I'm guessing that you've seen that over and over again,
all
Ruth.
the time. It is based on our woundedness that we frame our life and interpret it and tell stories
Yeah.
based on basically our programming.
Right, right. Well, we have a meaning-making brain. And so no matter whether it's you can't find your toothbrush, you're going to make up a meaning for why you can't find your toothbrush, or if it's we're having major marital conflict, right? So we will ruminate on a situation until we figure out a solution. And if we don't have the solution, if we have confusion, our brain will make up a story based on what you talked about there, Ruth, the programming from growing up. Right. And so this kind of rebuild stage is where we start to rebuild a new story, the true story, instead of bringing in the stories that are just in our head and creating, enemies out of each other, or, fill in the blank. We can be making up all kinds of stories. And sometimes our spouse is making up stories about us, and we're like, that's not me at all,
Yeah.
And so this,
well, that's more like me. It's like my spouse to make up stories about me. And don't you think that that is like a lot of divorces and breakups happen based on our perception of who the other person is, right? It does trigger me because of how I was misinterpreted. I don't know if that's the right word for it, or how I was seen rather than how I want to be seen.
Right. Yes. And it goes both ways. So there can be this, they're seeing me in this way and accusing me of things that's not really me. And I'm firm on that, right? Like, no, they're not going to be able to do that. But then the flip side happens, where the perception of your spouse may affect your own sense of self. You're like, I didn't think I did that. That wasn't my intention. Did I come across that way? And we start to get caught up in a lot of self-doubt. So it can go both ways. And so in the rebuild stage, we really focus in on kind of creating the new true story with getting curious and suspending judgment and replacing the shame and blame with what is really true. And as we move through that, what we do find is, the research tells us that it's like 63% of marital conflict never gets resolved. So, so now you're dealing with truth, but how do you resolve the conflict? Because sometimes it's, how do we figure out how to agree to disagree, right? So we don't want to have these same old cycles of conflict, and things that are unresolved. And what we know is that if you're having the same argument 3 times in a marriage, it's most likely a childhood issue. It's not just the marriage. And so if we're going through our stages of repairing our growing up view of things, and then going through and stopping the storytelling that's not true, but start telling the true story, then moving into how do we really create and restore the relationship itself, so that we can get to that place of appreciation and mutual understanding and genuine fondness, where we can actually work through issues, we can actually create resolve, and sometimes have to agree to disagree, which is great. But until we get to this stage of the healing process, it's almost impossible to agree to disagree. The way the arguments pan out and the stories pan out, the scripture tells us that we are to encourage one another and build one another up. And so this restore stage is where we're really cultivating that skill to do that, to really build one another up. And, we want to go into that place where we have each other's back, where that is a real, what we really feel. And as we move into the last stage, which is the receive stage, this is where not only are we starting to be able to agree to disagree, not only are we able to start having mutual respect, mutual understanding, and appreciation for one another, not only are we able to get through those conflicts, that 63% is even in a healthy marriage, get through those conflicts to some sort of compromise or resolution. Not only are we feeling heard and understood, but now we're also receiving from one another some of that healing love that we needed. Some of those things that so deeply hurt us growing up, that woundiness that drew us to that person, that place that needed to be poked on and stirred up so we could heal. Now we get to be that for one another. You and your spouse get to be healing sources for one another. And, what we know is that when we're a healing source, that is not just being God's reflection to one another, but the way that it impacts generations to come. We have generational healing as a result of what happens in the marriage. And so this receiving stage, we start to activate the similar hormones that we had in the early part of the relationship, the bonding hormones, the oxytocin, dopamine receptors. But this time it's not just fluffy, romantic, dating kind of stuff, but it's grounded in the truth of who you are, the acceptance of one another, your ability to collaborate. And so when these, feel-good hormones flood your system, it feels grounding and connecting instead of just fleeting.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, to me, the truth that you discover about conflict really is the game changer, because marriages are there to provide context of healing. And if you see that, if you're arguing 3 times the same thing over again in different contexts at different times, it's coming from your childhood woundedness. And having known that truth, I felt like a lot of marriages could have that new healing context to begin with. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And, it is how we recognize some of the things that we do is not understanding the context, right? Context of what's underneath and why she's saying that. Why is this happening, rather than just focusing on what does she say, or what did he say, or what am I feeling? There's always that context, and that's kind of true based on the truth of what God says and what you're teaching in your practices is great. So I wanted to move on to little more. I want to give them a little more context. So why is this important to couples to know? You've said that there are generational benefit to it.
Yeah.
Knowing all of that, why are people still struggling to reach out to a therapist, and what are the things that are holding them back?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because and I think you get this, Ruth, there's all these kind of subconscious wiring that we have, right? The knee-jerk responses that we developed growing up. And so, excuse me, we find ourselves, many people find themselves, and if you're listening to this right now, ask yourself these questions. Do you find yourself feeling like, you're not capable of a healthy relationship? Do you find yourself feeling like you're doing everything you can and nothing works? Do you find yourself feeling like, I have tried this book and this class and this podcast and this exercise, and you have become convinced that it's impossible to heal your relationship? A lot of people have that sense of either self-doubt. Some people even take it to the place of, maybe God doesn't want me to be happy. Maybe this is my cross to carry. Maybe God's not happy with me and this is my punishment. And so there's a lot of this internal dialogue that, if you're listening, please evaluate, because we don't like to think we think that way, but we find that we do underneath, and that holds us back. This belief that I'm not capable, this belief that God's not on my side, this belief that I've tried everything and nothing works. And the truth is that people try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and none of it meshes well together. And so then they think they've tried everything, but they haven't, because like I shared, I've got a system that we use to create that healing. Instead of a little nugget here, a little nugget there, we have a system that builds on itself to create the healing and the wholeness that we're looking for. We know, and scripture tells us that the sin is on the father to the son to the third and fourth generation. And what we know from the science, the research, from secular research, is that dysfunction runs in families for 4 generations. And if we look a little bit later in the book of Deuteronomy, God says, but blessings for 1,000
generations.
Yes, yes. And so we want to be that disruption that creates that blessing for 1,000 generations. We get to decide, we get to choose. And it takes risk. That feeling of, but if I try again and it doesn't work, is scary. Absolutely terrifying. And yet, when we create that disruption, we open up the door to those blessings.
That's so good. Yes, it's like God has given us incredible responsibility, but at the same time, choice. To choose healing, to choose change history.
Yes.
It's up to you. And that is the reason I went into healing, is that, yeah, I felt those ways. I felt like I've tried everything and nothing worked. So definitely, I feel that. Is there anything else that hold people back? I know I'm trying to get to more and more.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Yes, absolutely. So, we're feeling all these things on the inside, that all that doubt that's happening. And then externally, what we find is distraction. Well, my relationship's not in a good place. I'm not sure that it's going to heal. I don't have time to work on my marriage because I've got the kids, I've got work, I've got fill in the blank. And we tell ourselves that story that there's not enough time to heal the relationship, right? We tell ourselves a story that we're too busy. Sometimes it's throwing ourselves into work, right? I've got to work because I need to make more money, because I need to, support my family. But in the meantime, what we do know is that our EQ, our emotional intelligence, actually, the more emotionally intelligent we are, the more money we make. And so we're chasing the money with work versus chasing the emotional intelligence, the relationship that creates the healing that allows you to be more expansive at work, right? So we tell ourselves that we can't afford it. We tell ourselves we don't have time. And of course, sometimes we tell ourselves that our spouse won't change. Our spouse won't do the work. And the reality is no matter whether your spouse is willing to do work or not, that when you do the work, when you work on your own issues, your own struggles, your own side of the street, so to speak, your spouse will make changes. Your change necessitates your spouse's change. And if you're married to somebody who is emotionally well, mentally well, their changes are going to line up with your changes. Their changes are going to be positive of your changes. There's always the exception to the rule where you've got somebody with some deep mental issues where that's not going to happen. But more often than not, that does happen, where they're able to make the shifts and the changes. They don't even know that they're making, because we have this thing called mirror neurons, where when we engage with other people, we tend to reflect them. And that's part of our survival mechanism as well. And so that your spouse will typically make more positive changes. I mean, I've had many people that have come to me that their spouse was unwilling to do the work. And later their spouse is thanking me. Their spouse is reaching out to me saying that I helped them save their marriage. And I never worked with the spouse. So there can be considerable change and growth on just working on your part, stepping fully into the person that God created you to be and creating that dynamic change that you want to see.
Yes, it's amazing. So all these excuses and the blocks are absolutely not true, because truth is that you are making a difference by working on yourself. You are creating an impact in your marriage. That's amazing. So what should listeners do next?
Well, it's perfect timing because I have an event coming called the Marriage Mastery Live Retreat, where we're going to get to spend 5 hours together, starting with a Q&A. Well, first of all, we're going to go deep into these 4 steps of the healing process and really unpack what that looks like. And you'll get to hear stories of people who have done it and on the other side. So you can see practically what worked and what didn't work. And then we're going to kick it off though with a Q&A. So all these questions you have because you did that exercise the podcast teacher said that you should try and it fell flat, or that technique you read in the book that you couldn't figure out how to make it work in your relationship, bring those questions and we'll talk about, we'll talk about your questions and formulate the next part of this session together, including all those different elements as well. And not only do we have this amazing time on Sunday where we get to go deep together, and it's going to be virtual, so it's going to be in a Zoom room, so it's going to be very intimate. There will not be a replay because I want it to be a safe place for people to share their own journey. I want them to know that they're secure and safe and that their story is not going to be broadcast out to the world. And normally doing some kind of retreat like this is going to cost you probably something like $1,000, and you start adding in travel and all of those things as well. And this is just going to be $47. And for $47, we go deep. You get your questions answered. We work through the processes that will help you heal your marriage. And in addition to that, I have a few bonuses. So I have some scriptures you can pray over your marriage. I have a devotional for your marriage. I have 2 audio courses for you that you can, pop in the headphones and take them on a walk. One is called Build a Connection. It's about emotional intimacy. And the other one is Bounce Back Better, which is about overcoming setbacks in your marriage. So all of that for $47.
That is amazing. And all the bonuses, amazing. I am so excited to share this information with my audience. It's exclusively to my audience. Yeah. I love that you're doing that. And thank you so much. Is there a website or a link?
Yeah. So it's Marriage Mastery. Oh, you know what? Let me put it in the chat because the link that your audience is going to use is a unique link. And we'll, when you send this out to your audience, we'll make sure that they have the right link for that, because I just remember it's a different link for your audience. And I want to make sure that your audience gets to have this incredible deal for themselves.
Yes. I'll make sure that I'll share my unique link to that. Wow. Thank you so much for this incredible journey and that you've had and the work that you do. I appreciate you so much, and I am excited to share with my audience about your workshop. It's a 5-hour marriage mastery live, and just you can scroll down in this content and you can see it below it. I would love to be in attendance as well and just share my nuggets and share what it's all about. So all that being said, is there any last comments, anything that you want to share with your audience who is tuning in and watching it later on here, who are resonating with what you're saying?
Yeah. What I would say is that there's always hope, that our meaning-making brain puts limits on what we can have. And not only that, our personal experiences, whether it's within the marriage or whether it's outside the marriage, we can find ourselves limited in what we think can actually happen, and know that every relationship, every person can heal and get whole. And it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of intention. I tell my clients all the time, with consistent intention, we create sustainable change. And so having the intention to do what you need to do to create that wholeness, and know that it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely amazing. Hope that we have in scriptures and what we have available in this world is enough.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes. Yes.
Thanks
All
so
right.
much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming. Hope you have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.